Hello and welcome to Read Read. Today I wanted to share some thoughts on Hesse's Siddhartha. This is a 1922 almost post-spiritual novel, which I'll get to in a moment, that follows our titular character Siddhartha, who is not to be confused with the Buddha, although he is contemporaneous with the Buddha in this story. And it is our character Siddhartha's journey on trying to basically reach enlightenment, reach nirvana. And this was from what I've heard and seen, this was a very influential novel around the 60s and 70s, or 50s, 60s, 70s, around when it was starting to get some English translations, and really during a lot of the kind of counterculture hippie movement to introduce a lot of Eastern ideas and themes to Westerners. But what was really cool is, like I said, with this being a post-spiritual novel, it's like, yes, you can read it and you can sort of see that there are a lot of things that align with what we in the West think of as themes of Eastern spirituality, but it's also abundantly clear that it is not trying to be an Eastern novel, and that much is really clear just for the simple fact that our character Siddhartha is not the Buddha. And to make it clear for a Western audience, it would be like, imagine if you wrote a story with our main character being Jesus, who goes and meets a person named Yeshua and is listening to their teachings, and that Yeshua is very obviously what we think of as being Jesus, but this character Jesus is like, oh no, this is I see what you're doing, but I want to be like you, I don't want to be saved by you. And that is pretty much what the confrontation, or the interaction, it's not really a confrontation, everyone's very chill in this book, that is what the interaction between Siddhartha and the Buddha is, or Gautama, the Buddha, is in this book. I'll really quickly just bang out every single plot point. We start off with Siddhartha as being a Brahmin, the son of a son of an ascetic, coming from an ascetic family. He hears about the Buddha. He goes and listens to him, listens to the Buddha, decides to go on and he doesn't stay devoted to the Buddha, but his friend Govinda does. Siddhartha goes and meets a lady named Kamala, who takes him under her wing and teaches him the art of sex play. Pretty much, in order to get to that, he needs to make some money, and so he pursues business. Eventually, with a really great one-liner quote that I'll try and find. Slowly, the soul sickness of the rich crept over him, and so he decides to leave all of that behind, and he goes back to a river that he had found. He talks to the river guy, and whose name is Vasudeva, and Vasudeva's basically like, wait a minute, you hear that? You hear the river? And Siddhartha listens to the river and he's like, oh shit, this river is got some things to say. And so Siddhartha goes under Vasudeva's wing, who is not a preacher. He is just a person who listens. And this is something that resonates very strongly with Siddhartha. Eventually, Vasudeva becomes old and just walks into the forest to be gone, and we pretty much end the book with Siddhartha being kind of sort of reaching enlightenment, and he re-encounters his old friend Govinda, who are both old by this point, and pretty much Siddhartha just says to him, the thing that I've learned is that knowledge can be transferred but not wisdom, and that you need to go and live and convert knowledge into wisdom through life. And that's pretty much the story. It's a very fun read. You can read it, you can smash it out in like 3 or 4 hours probably. Well, depends how fast you read, of course. But so before I get into reading some extracts and things that I like, and a lot of the extracts are just going to sound like what we in the West think of as Eastern spirituality, what I liked a lot, and the image or the comparison that stuck in my head throughout reading this whole thing, was just how much Kung Fu Panda reminded me of this book, or this book reminded me of Kung Fu Panda, in that Kung Fu Panda is a similar story of a teacher who has reached enlightenment, needing to figure out how to pass on these teachings to somebody without just getting them to follow in their steps. And so just like Siddhartha doesn't want to be saved by the Buddha or to be alleviated of suffering through the teachings of the Buddha. He wants to be his own Buddha. Oogway is just like, I need someone to give this dragon scroll to. But nobody is wanting to be themselves. They all just want to be like me. And Shifu is training everybody so strictly to, follow in all these styles. But as soon as Oogway sees Po, he's like, oh yeah, this is him. This is perfect. But the story is not a Chinese story, and there is. For a much better detailed account of what I'm saying, please go and check out Accented Cinema's video on this. I'll put it in the description. I don't want to steal like his content and stuff, but essentially he makes the point that the story and the setting of Kung Fu Panda does not look like China. It looks like Chinatown, and it looks like what Westerners think China looks like, but it is a story of people who love that influence of China in their lives. They still love going to Chinatown and they love eating these things. They authentically love the inauthentic, which is still its own sort of love. And that's why I thought of this book, and I would even, say for Kung Fu Panda as well, it's a post-Eastern spiritual book. And the other takeaway that I got from this book is that even though it is a book that preaches the fact that knowledge can be transferred, but not wisdom, the book is also aware of the fact, or it doesn't presume to be wisdom itself. It still knows that it is just knowledge because, as always, the book is always critical of the fact that whenever we use words to convey these ideas, yes, there's the fact that words are sort of limited and that they are only signs representing these things that are being signified, and then not to mention the fact that they get interpreted by another person when we hear them. Meanwhile, all of this information is coming at you through a book, through the medium of the fact that Hesse was an author. And Hesse is okay with that because he knows that it could never be any different. He's still just trying to convey knowledge as best as he possibly can to try and help people convert it into wisdom, but he's not saying that, he's not presuming that this is going to be wisdom in and of itself. And so here's a quick extract from when Siddhartha is talking with the Buddha. The Buddha, basically, just to summarize beforehand, Siddhartha is listening to the Buddha and he's like, oh, that's all pretty cool, but a problem is that all of your teachings about the unity and everything of the universe are leaving out one critical flaw, and that's this idea of rising above it all, as you have. What's the deal with that? And Gautama is like, okay, yeah. Let me warn you, you who are thirsty of knowledge, against the thicket of opinions and the conflict of words. Opinions mean nothing. They may be beautiful or ugly, clever or foolish. Anyone can embrace or reject them. The teaching which you have heard, however, is not my opinion, and its goal is not to explain the world to those who are thirsty for knowledge. Its goal is quite different. Its goal is salvation from suffering. That is what Gautama teaches, nothing else. And that's the thing that Siddhartha hears, which makes him realize, you're teaching me to be a follower of the Buddha, not to be my own Buddha, not to reach nirvana, so I need to go on and find this on myself. And the last thing I believe the Buddha says is, be on your guard against too much cleverness. This is another awesome image, and one of the cool things about this book is that, yes, it is not wisdom, it is still just knowledge, but it does find some really pithy, succinct ways to summarize things that will help you in your journey to transferring them into wisdom. Of course, again, disclaimer, all of this video of me talking about all of these things and every single video you've ever watched ever is also still just knowledge. But anyway, this is what Siddhartha is talking about. He's talking about the way in which he goes through the world. And he wrote, most people, Kamala, are like a falling leaf that drifts and turns in the air, flutters and falls to the ground. But a few others are like stars which travel one defined path. No wind reaches them. They have within themselves their guide and their path. Among all the wise men, of whom I knew many, there was one who was perfect in this respect. I can never forget him. He is Gautama, the illustrious one who preaches this gospel. And then he says, thousands of young men hear his teachings every day and follow his instructions every hour, but they are falling leaves. They have not the wisdom and guide within themselves. So he still has this great reverence because he sees that the Buddha, or he sees that Gautama is what he wants to get to, but he cannot, just by the nature of wanting to be an individual, he cannot get that by following the Buddha. I said this in my recognitions video when William Gaddis is just slamming against Dale Carnegie and that whole idea. Another very pithy statement: the self ceases to exist once you stop seeking it alone. Another thing that sort of came into conflict with my Western idea or perception of Eastern spirituality versus how it came up here is that Kamala and Siddhartha have this relationship where she realizes that all that he is doing for himself. He is trying to reach enlightenment for himself, and so he doesn't really love anybody. And she says, "You do not really love me, you love nobody. Is that not true?" And then Siddhartha says, "Maybe I am like you. You cannot love either, otherwise how could you practice love as an art? Perhaps people like us cannot love. Ordinary people can. That is their secret." And then one last thing, this was funny to read for people who talk about simulations and the fact that things, maybe things aren't real and they don't matter. And then so Govinda is saying, but what you call thing, is it something real, something intrinsic? Is it not only the illusion of Maya, only image and appearance? Your stone, your tree, are they real? This does not trouble me much, says Siddhartha. If they are illusion, then I am also illusion, and so they are always of the same nature as myself. And without giving away any more plot things, I think that's actually where I'll end the video. I thought this was really fun, of course, and it was great, again, to fill in that gap in my literary knowledge. Thanks for listening. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next video.